Just waiting on a couple panelists that are having technical difficulties, but I am excited to get the panel started. We have a couple panelists that I'll introduce in a minute, and then the others will show up after. My name is Kyle Spicer. I'm the Director of Export Development at Invest Nova Scotia, and I'm happy to host this panel, which is entitled The Export Journey. So as we know, over the last couple of years, there's been the export journey for a lot of companies has really altered, has changed because of COVID-19 and some of the other issues around labor shortages, supply chain issues, production capacity issues. So we have a great group today that are going to be here to talk to you about some of the strategies and some of the opportunities that they've seen over the last couple of years to take advantage of global markets. So without further ado, what I will do, I'll introduce Michael and Damien at this point, and then when Lisa and Laura arrive, I will introduce them as well. But first of all, we have Michael Peters, who is the CEO of Bluescat Ventures in Hansport. Michael is the current co-chair of the Micmac Canada Nova Scotia Tripartite Economic Development Committee and a board member of the Annapolis Valley Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
And then we also have Damien Barry, who's the CAO and General Counsel for Louisbourg Seafoods. We could hardly have an expert journey conversation in Nova Scotia, obviously, without discussing our largest export, seafood. Damien has experience working in several different international markets, and we look forward to his input today. Welcome, Damien.
Thank you. Good morning.
I will maybe I'll introduce the other two, and then when they arrive, I'll have them introduce themselves in a little bit more detail. But we're also going to have Lisa Learning, the founder of Atlantic Repellent Products, join us. She's born out of the need to protect her family. Lisa is an inventor who traveled the long road to having her natural health product registered with Health Canada. And then we're also going to have Laura Simpson join us, who many of you might have seen on Dragon's Den a number of months ago. She's the CEO and co-founder of Side Door. She spent much of her life serving the needs of artists and promoting live performance. And today she'll be happy to talk to you about her company and how they've been exporting. So why don't we dive in, Michael? Why don't you start? Maybe just give us some background on yourself, on your company, and what your endeavor into global markets has been to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the invite. As mentioned, I'm Michael Peters. I'm CEO of Bluescat Ventures. We are the Economic Development Corporation, owned and operated by Bluescat First Nation. We are a Mi'kmaq community located halfway between the towns of Wolfville and Windsor, here in the Annapolis Valley. Our mission statement is to do something today that makes our community more prosperous than it was yesterday. Our purview is to oversee all economic development activities on behalf of the community, including the management of our established businesses, growing and starting some new businesses, and increasing employment opportunities. We generate about 87% of Bluescat First Nation's revenues and employ about 100 people, depending on the season. And we have investments in a variety of industries, but we have a focus on renewables, seafood, and retail. And I'll be talking today, focusing on kind of our exporting businesses, such as some seafood, as well as our wine. We began exporting in 2017. About 90% of our seafood is exported, mostly to the United States, Asia, Europe. We also export outside the province to Ontario and Quebec. Our seafood includes lobster, scallops, clams, tuna, halibut, and other ground fish. And about only 2% of our wine is currently exported to other Indigenous communities across Canada. So glad to be here.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Damien? Oh, first, before we go to Damien, Lisa and Laura, welcome. We're glad to have you join us. I know that you guys had some technical difficulties, but we're happy that you're here now. We're just going around and doing some short intros of ourselves and our companies and what our endeavors into exporting have looked like to this point. So we'll go to Damien next.
Thanks, Kyle, and good morning to everybody else on the panel and everybody else tuning in today. My name is Damien Barry. I'm the CEO and General Counsel with the Louisbourg Seafoods Group. Our head office is based in Sydney, but we have operations in Louisbourg, Englishtown, Glace Bay, Canso, Halifax, PEI. So we We've grown dramatically since 1984 when the company was founded as a stevedoring company. We're a seafood processor and harvester, and I would approximate 95% of our products are exported. We harvest and process species such as lobster, snow crab, sea cucumber, whelk, mussels, seaweed. So we have quite a diverse range of products that we process and export. Company at this stage has grown to about, at the height of lobster season, we would have approximately 650 employees across all of our processing facilities. Export markets are obviously huge for our business, so I'm excited to talk a little bit more about them today.
Great. Thanks, Damien. Lisa, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Lisa Learning. I'm the CEO and founder of Atlantic Repellent Products. We create and manufacture natural repellent products here in Nova Scotia, and we send them to all across Canada. Our focus is mainly on ticks, but also insects as well. And we do personal sprays, ground sprays, and are working on some other fabric sprays and stuff like that in the background. And I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. And last but definitely not least, Laura Simpson. Laura, I did let people know that you were on Dragon's Den in case they weren't aware of that. But we're looking forward to hearing from you as well, Laura.
Oh, well, thanks. And I am a tech founder, but I have not figured out how to mirror my image yet. I'm just trying to work on that in the background. Forgive me for being late. I am the CEO and co-founder of Side Door. We're located in Halifax, but we work all over US and Canada, basically matchmaking spaces that have spaces like available room for live performance with artists who are looking to tour and perform. So we do that basically through kind of like Tinder plus Airbnb technology to create bookings and ticketing and then payouts for these shows. So folks can attend performances in places like backyards, breweries, bookstores, that kind of thing. We immediately had to export outside of the Maritimes because we just simply don't have the space or the population to support our company. So I think our first US show was within a year of our founding. So we've been doing that ever since.
All right, awesome. Actually, Laura, that's a great segue into the first question I want to ask, because you've talked about some of the motivations for you for your company to export into new markets. So that's what I want to get the group to discuss a bit, is what were some of the key motivators that have caused your companies to look to new markets? And we'll why don't we start? Who would like to start? Why don't we start? Laura, why don't we go back to you?
Sure. For us, we actually look for secondary and tertiary markets because we're looking for where the need is greater. So in our case, there's not a lot of places in between major cities for artists to stop. So they're doing things like if they're traveling from Toronto to Halifax, they might have a night off and not make any money and lose money that night. So we look for spaces in between Toronto and Halifax for them to stop on the way and have smaller shows. So actually those smaller markets are great for us. And we also look for partners in terms of like just a live music appreciation culture. Some places are better than others. We find that like we're discovering in the US that, you can have a really great music city like Nashville, but they're saturated with venues and options already. So if you go just maybe outside 100 kilometers, you have that same appreciation, but not the saturation. So we kind of go for that just in terms of like what our customers actually have and what they actually want in order to choose a market to go into.
All right, thanks. Damien?
I think for us, it's the sheer volume of product that we produce. We would love to be in more local markets and have a greater presence in Canada, but traditionally we've been a wholesaler, so the amount of products that we produce, we would have to export to the bigger markets like the US or China. We also have some very specific products that would be specific to certain areas. So for example, we would produce sea cucumber and whelk, which aren't necessarily products there's a great demand for here in Canada, but there's a huge demand in China and Japan and other Southeast Asian countries. So we had to focus on those markets in order to be able to sell those products. We've also more recently tried to, or we're starting to move into the West Coast of the US now, just trying to open up new markets. So I think Laura had mentioned it earlier, where simply there wasn't the market size here at home to support what we were producing. So that would have been the original motivation. But we found now over the last, I guess it's over 30 years now since the company's founded, we're now trying to circle back more towards domestic markets and become more retail ready in order to be able to access those markets. And I guess, it's going to be mentioned at some stage today, but COVID obviously had a huge impact as well on our business and our business model, where when supply chains get disrupted, it causes significant issues, especially when you're dealing with products such as live lobster or products with a limited shelf life.
Great, thanks. Michael, any thoughts here?
Yeah, on our key motivations, we are a small Mi'kmaq community, but we've been, the Mi'kmaq have been exporting and doing international business for a very long time, for a lot of generations. We have a dig site not far from here that discovered some, artifacts that are over 8,000 years old and have been found to come originally from the Ohio Valley. So we know there's been a lot of trade in and around the Annapolis Valley for many generations, and we want to continue that tradition. When it comes to our businesses today, diversification is very important, especially when you talk about, the seafood. Damien mentioned, that's where the market is. If you want to get volume, you really got to go international. With regards to our wine, we did partner with a local winery here, the Benjamin Bridge Winery, which they've already do some exporting of their own wine to Europe. So part of our own strategic plan is to get into agriculture. Obviously, we're here in wine country in Annapolis Valley, so it only makes sense. In the past, we kind of looked at buying wineries, but we kind of instead decided to partner with established wineries and vineyards, and we want to do more business with other Indigenous communities across Canada. So a lot of these communities across Canada have a lot of restaurants and have a lot of businesses like that, and trying to get and provide services for them through wine is something that we kind of been growing into, and it's been doing quite well. So there's definitely a lot of different motivations and good ways to export internationally. So
great, thanks. And Lisa?
Well, when I first started, the goal was to create a product for Canadians that was an alternative to DEET, but just as effective. And so we started out locally, but then of course we've since gone all across Canada, because ticks are not just a Nova Scotia issue, they're a Canada-wide issue, and it's just getting worse every year. So there was definitely an opportunity, and it was our goal from the beginning.
I'm going to expand on this question a little bit. So obviously new markets are critical to each of you, and you've each discussed your motivations. What about your strategy? What has the strategy look like? What resources or what type of research have you done to expand into new markets? Just trying to give the audience a flavor for what that might look like.
I can talk a little bit about our end first. There's certain parts in Canada where ticks are worse than others. And so our original strategy was to kind of focus on those provinces. So when we did our advertising, that's what we focused on. We focused on the end user. And as a result, we had a lot of retailers reach out to us. That's how we started. And then it just grew from there.
And Lisa, have you guys had much of a shift due to COVID on into e-commerce, or has that changed your business plan?
Yeah, it definitely, in a way that COVID actually wasn't really bad for us. It was kind of good for us because people were getting out more into nature and doing their own thing. And then of course, with the beauty of e-commerce, it was quite easy. So our retail sales did go down, our e-commerce sales went up, and now we're seeing the balance shift again.
All right, great. Anyone else on the research or the strategy side of developing new markets?
Yeah, we've done quite a bit of research. We've hired a lot of consultants to do various strategies and branding strategies for us in particular. We've used trade commissioners, which are extremely helpful in international markets, connecting with them in the countries that they're situated in. And if you can find one with, the background in your particular industry, that's even better. We've used those. We've also, of course, used resources by other government sources such as EDC and so on. One thing that we've been working on with our strategy, we're actually going through a new 5-year strategy development right now with regards to exports, but we're looking at our branding strategy as well. We have created a lot of Glooscap Indigenous branded foods in the past, including maple syrup, which wasn't an export product, but was here in Nova Scotia. We've done the same with the wine. The wine is Indigenous and Glooscap branded. It's available at NSLC. And of course, our next goal is to kind of do that with our seafood, is create a Glooscap Indigenous brand for seafood market for Northern Europe, particularly Germany and Austria. We had a consultant do some market research into Indigenous branding, and that's kind of where a lot of the fell on was those 2 countries. So it came back very positive. So we're definitely looking to grow for sure.
All right, thanks, Michael. And I do notice we have a question in the chat, so I'll try to keep an eye on the chat as well throughout this panel. And I think this one's for Damien. How automated is seafood processing production? Does automation help improve productivity? In your opinion, how can seafood processing industry improve its productivity and waste management? And Michael, you might be able to comment on that as well.
Yeah, obviously, like any other industry, we move more and more towards automation. I guess each year we would make significant capital investments just to keep up with industry standards and also trying to improve productivity. We're no different than a lot of industries here in Nova Scotia, where labor is a significant issue anyway. So we have to pivot towards more automation in order to maintain our production levels. So I guess the short answer is yes, it is very important, and it's something that we try and invest in each year. We've been extremely lucky to work with entities such as NSBI, who provide great support to us when we do undertake those projects. So we've been lucky enough to receive a couple of rebates through NSBI and the provincial government through our capital investment in automation. But yes, it's extremely important. It's something we look at every year. The nature of our business is that if you're not constantly updating your processing equipment, it has a limited shelf life, and each year there seems to be a better mousetrap that comes out. So you got to keep up in order to be productive.
All right, great, thank you. All right, I'm gonna move on to the next question. So I want you guys to tell me a little bit about what has happened or changed since you began exporting. So think about when you started looking at markets outside of Nova Scotia versus what you're looking at now. Obviously, for some that's a longer time period than others, but and give me a flavor for what has changed and what that has forced or enabled your company to look for from an opportunity perspective. Maybe I'll start with Laura.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. I mean, so we have a transactional business, a marketplace, right? So we get our revenue from ticket sales. The first US show we didn't know if the bank was going to send the money through or accept the sale, because banks are very different in the US than they are in Canada. That was our first lesson. And then beyond that, we got into online shows during the pandemic. And so we were doing all these transactions online, trying to figure out tax for online services was actually, I think still is a muddled, confusing mess for most tech services to understand. So we kind of navigated that. And today we have automations for working out things like taxation per district, performance royalties per district, currencies per show location. We split our revenue 3 ways between ourselves, the host who's local, and the artist who's transient. And so that takes different measurements and goes to different bank accounts. So all of those things were learnings and technologies that we had to build over time in order to work internationally. But because now that we built that out, it actually gives us a value prop that we didn't have before, which is those are all built in and people don't have to work that out for themselves, which they were doing before.
All right, great. Michael, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so we bought into a company that was already exporting. That's kind of how we originally got into it, even though it was part of our strategic plan. So the learning curve, was definitely steep because we got thrown a lot into it. but that's how we gained our experience. For us, it's to keep our, our competitive advantage. We continue to keep our quality high. That's kind of what we've been known for, and that's how we kind of stand out in a way. We're certainly not the cheapest in the market. You can certainly find cheaper wine elsewhere. You can certainly find cheaper lobster elsewhere, and so on. But keeping our quality quite high is important. Making sure we have sustainability plans and ESGs and all those things are very important to make sure that your company is moving forward as well. So yeah, for us, that's been very important to stay competitive.
All right, great. Damien or Lisa?
Well, we've changed a lot in that we started out literally just hand measuring stuff, and now we're in a big warehouse, fully automated. Our bottling is automated, and that was our biggest shift, and huge learning curve for sure. But we did have help along the way with consultants and different avenues like that we got through all the different agencies, COA and Invest Nova Scotia, which is now called Next.
Well, no, we were Nova Scotia Business Inc. and now we're called Invest Nova Scotia.
Right,
So,
Invest Nova Scotia. Yeah.
in Nova Corp, for everybody in the audience, in Nova Corp and Nova Scotia Business Inc. are now one crown corporation called Invest Nova Scotia.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, that's that was our biggest shift, is going from doing everything by hand to being fully automated, because as we increased, we grew pretty fast, because we started out just in Nova Scotia, and then it just kind of exploded because there was such a need for it. So we had to get all the machinery and et cetera, and learn how to use it, how to navigate it and all that.
So do you have people on staff that are looking at product development and R&D on a continuous basis? Is that
Always. Yeah, for sure. Because it started out with just the tick spray, but there's so many more other pockets that need to be filled, and we always have to be coming up with new ideas. Otherwise, we just kind of, you can fall behind pretty quick. So yeah, no, we've got people that are project managing research all the time.
all right? Great. And before we go to Damien, maybe I'll go back to Laura. There was a question in the chat, asking if you could talk a little bit more about dealing with American banks and what the challenges are or were.
Yeah, I'll kind of try to keep this answer general so it's applicable to lots of companies, but the bank in Canada, we're so much more likely to belong to one of 4 or 5 banks. But in the US, there's just so many more banks, and it's way more decentralized, and accepting transactions from outside of the country can be a little trickier. So if your credit card is being charged, or your bank card is being charged from a company that it doesn't recognize from outside the company, you just would block it. So you basically have to work. So we work with Stripe, and so that helps a little bit. But we're dealing with flagged transactions at the beginning, and just learning how to deal with that very quickly, and then building out ways to protect yourself so that transaction actually goes through is the most helpful thing.
Damien, any thoughts here on what has changed for you guys? I mean, you guys have been exporting a long time. I know that. So there's likely a lot that has changed, but any thoughts?
Yeah, there's been a huge amount that's changed. I guess, I've just been with the company 5-6 years now. So I guess from my own point of view, and I guess if we focus on one market, such as China, for example, previously when we started exporting it to China, we were very reliant on outside brokers, people helping us to navigate that. So even shipping product, things like that. So we've tried to build out our internal expertise over time so that we can deal with that internally. So for example, with respect to logistics, we started our own shipping company. With respect to dealing with customs in China and customers and so on, we've hired a Chinese sales manager, just that's his specific remit. So it's as we've grown and as we produce more and more each year, rather than rely on outside expertise, we're trying to build out our own internal expertise. So for example, Xiao Wei, our Chinese sales manager, was an MBA student at CBU who literally walked into our office one day with his resume. And we made that connection, and now he's a key part of our team. So I think as you grow larger, it's trying to build out that internal expertise with specific markets so that you know exactly what's going on, and I guess you're getting the best bang for your buck as well when you're exporting there.
Yeah, I can actually layer on that a bit too. We've found at Invest Nova Scotia, working with many of our partners across Atlantic Canada, that having in-market programming, more longer term programming has helped a number of our companies. So we've got the Europe Market Development Program now. We've got an Asia Market Development Program. We've got scale up hubs for tech companies in the States, where companies can work with consultants on the ground on a longer term, 8, 10, 12 months at a time, as opposed to simply getting into market and getting back out of market. So we've heard that from companies, and it's been a bit of a shift for us as well. So yeah, thanks for that, Damien. I want to layer on a bit on this question. I want to talk to you, or I want to hear from you guys about obstacles that you're facing today in exporting, whether they're related to COVID or not. I know COVID certainly has created some challenges. I'm aware of that, from supply chain issues, travel issues, and others. But just want to really understand what challenges you guys are seeing in your businesses, and how you guys might overcome those in the next weeks and months. Maybe I'll start with, Laura looks like she has a comment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting when you're exporting is that you're playing against the biggest competitors, right? You're expected to have Apple quality design and functionality, and the most reliable, most secure networks. Like everything that you do on a technical level has to compete with the biggest companies of the world. And so that often is difficult unless you have your own particular niche. So, I think that's one thing to just sort of speak up about a little bit, is like, you might not be able to compete on those levels to be like the most efficient or the most secure or whatever. But in our case, for example, our niche is that we do the matchmaking between the artist and the host. There's not actually any other company that we know of that does that effectively and at a large scale like we do. So that is our niche. We do have the other components, but it's like why the customers actually stay with us, because we offer something that the other companies don't.
Great, thank you. Anyone else on this one?
I think for us, it's working more with our long-standing customers as well. COVID caused huge disruption in markets. The seafood sector is being hit at the moment as well. So what we're trying to do is be more strategic with our customers. Find out exactly what they want, try and tailor our processing exactly to what the market is looking for at this time. There's still a bit of a lag as well from COVID with respect to supply chain issues. So, even from someone had asked earlier about, the automating our production, when you have to get new parts in for machinery, the lead times are still substantial, or whether it's parts for our vessels. So that all has a knock-on effect on our processing times and our ability to supply our customers. Even things such as exchange rate. We trade seafood in US dollars. So, any significant changes in exchange rate can have a huge impact on our projections for the year as well. So and regulatory requirements. When you're exporting to numerous different markets, there's significant regulatory requirements. So for example, in shipping seafood to China at the moment, there's brand new regulatory requirements we have to go through, which is a paperwork nightmare at the moment. But essentially, you have to do that in order to access these markets. So I guess they're ongoing challenges, but I think each year there's always challenges anyway when you're exporting. So I think you have to walk in with an open mind, in that you might have a great year one year, but it doesn't matter. The next year there can be brand new requirements that you have to go through in order to access those markets. So I think you have to be nimble and be able to adapt quickly to what the market and regulatory requirements are asking for.
Lisa, I know maybe you can layer on that a bit. I know that the regulatory piece is important from your perspective, and I know you've worked with Health Canada to make sure that your products have the proper certifications that they need. So maybe you can speak to that a bit too.
Yeah, this is why there's not a whole lot of natural pesticides on the market, because the regulations are so stringent and you're expected to fit into a man-made chemical box. So that was a huge challenge for us, and we just had to keep going back to the drawing board. That's why it took us 5 years. So yeah, that's always an ongoing thing. But just to talk a little bit about getting supplies in, and we had to, when COVID hit, we had to shift in that instead of ordering 6 weeks ahead of time, we had to now start thinking 3 months ahead of time. And the challenging part of that, of course, is you don't always know what the demand is going to be. So it's a real, you're guessing a lot of times. It can be an educated guess, it's still a guess. Another issue we had too with the COVID was, of course, everybody did, employees, but you can contract a lot of stuff out. So that wasn't such a big deal. But in the manufacturing part, we needed hands-on people. So we ended up hiring, we literally had to kind of go out into the community, and people who were retired or people who were stay-at-home moms that kids were just going to school. So we just had to kind of be flexible with our hours and shift around in order to get the people in to work.
And thanks, Lisa. There is a question in the chat for you. Do you have any recommendations for someone approaching Health Canada that doesn't?
Oh, Lord.
Wow. This might be a long conversation.
That's a big one. They should contact me personally. That's a huge one. Basically, just know that you do have to fit into their box. They're not going to change for you. And you have to be very creative, and you especially where, for example, where we have a natural product. If you take lemongrass as an essential oil, it has over 50 compounds in it. They only want you to fit into the singular compound box. So we had to be creative and find a way around it. And so you have to find a way. And I would suggest consultants for sure, if you can find somebody who has experience in that exact area. And then, of course, just talking to as many people as you can until you finally get the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I would layer on that as saying that here at Invest Nova Scotia, us with our partners, we're happy to try to help walk you through some of those challenges, and certainly if it would help, we could get you in touch with folks like Lisa to have a conversation on trying to help you guys get through the challenges that you're having. I wanted to, Michael, you had mentioned ESG. And I know this is a topic. There's going to be a workshop actually later this morning that Nancy Foran's putting on ESG. Has this been a big topic of conversation within your guys' businesses recently? Are you hearing it from other companies that would like to see it become more of a priority for you guys? I see Damien. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely. We've been hearing it from both ends, from both customer bases as stakeholders, but also internally from our own ownership, from our own community. Because remember, we are community owned. So, when we have our AGMs and public meetings and stuff like that, getting feedback, yeah, so we absolutely hear stuff like that. ESG, sustainability, all those, keywords that to move ourselves forward, people want to see that. That we're not just all about, profit in the end. There's so much more to it. So absolutely.
Anybody else have thoughts on that? No. All right, thank you. Let's move to the next question. So there are a few of you have mentioned service providers, including ACOA, Global Affairs, and others, and Invest Nova Scotia. I was wondering if you guys could speak to all of you could speak to what services and what advisors that you would suggest entrepreneurs take advantage of as they look to grow and scale into new markets. I'm happy to, Damien.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to answer that first. I think people sometimes aren't aware of the resources that are out there. That's the first thing. So I think it's becoming aware, reaching out to provincial agencies, federal agencies, but there's a huge amount of resources out there to help people starting out in their export journey. For example, I said NSBI earlier, I guess I should say Invest Nova Scotia, but historically, we've always had a great relationship with Invest Nova Scotia, and they've been huge supporters of the seafood sector in organizing trade missions and and things like that. So I think, you know, it's accessing resources like that. You know, if you're exporting to customers and it's your first time exporting, you need to make sure that they're EDC insured as well. You know, you want to make sure that you get paid. So, you know, working with EDC would be a one that I would particularly recommend, or another export insurer. You know, a COA are a great resource as well. You know, they provide support if for export services. Yeah, even dealing with your own bank, you know, things like that. But I think that, and we've also accessed programs such as a TAP program. So for me, there's lots of resources out there. There's lots of free dollars out there at times to help you on your journey. So I guess my advice would just be whatever's out there, try and access it. And I think Michael had mentioned earlier the trade commissioners. I think they're a really underused resource. Anytime we've reached out to trade commissioners in different markets, they've been extremely helpful. You know, they'll set up meetings for you. So for example, if you're going to a trade show and you haven't set up at least 10 meetings, then it's probably not worth your while going to the trade show, because from our experience, all the pre-meetings that you set up and all the pre-work that's done before a trade show, that's where you're going to get the value, and trade commissioners can be a huge part of that.
Great. Michael, were you gonna, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
No, I was just going to say everything Damien said. Yeah, for sure. And then just to mirror off of that, don't ever be afraid to ask questions. And there's no such thing as a stupid question, because when I got into what I'm doing now, I don't have a science background. I knew nothing about science. I knew about business. So you just ask questions, and people are always willing to help you, like Invest Nova Scotia. Or if they can't, they're going to point you in a direction where you can ask questions to somebody else who might know someone else. Who you just keep asking questions and you will get there.
Great. Yeah, I agree with that. Michael?
Yeah, I think they're all right on, you know, exactly with, you know, everything with EDC, trade commissioners, NSBI, Invest Nova Scotia, sorry. You know, all these sources, global affairs, ACOA, there's so many out there, resources to help. You know, we talked in the last question, obstacles and stuff, you know, trying to get through those regulations, and there's often more and more non-tariff trade barriers there seems to be out there. I know, especially with regards to our wine, there's a lot in that, let alone international borders. There's quite a bit actually within Canada, between provinces as well, which is unfortunate. But yeah, my advice would definitely just, you know, take your time and don't rush into something. You know, certainly ask for help. Those resources are out there, and you know, go and find them. So for sure.
Laura, anything to add on this one?
Yeah, I mean, new markets are really expensive and it takes a long time to figure it out. Like, you'll spend a lot of time and money spending, you know, just basically, especially around marketing for us. Like, putting marketing dollars into the US is like just a black hole. So it's like, how long do you do it before you turn and you make another decision? But, you know, we used a loan from ACOA to expand to the US market, and we've actually taken more time than we thought with that, and spread that money over a longer period of time, just because we knew that the way the market is going, it's very uneven right now. But it's helped a lot, because it just means that we're not dumping those funds and losing them completely. We could reclaim them and pay it off in a longer timeline. So it really helps to have those funds to experiment, especially when you're going into a huge market like the US.
All right, great. You know what, I'll elaborate a little on that. We, because the water can be muddied at times when it comes to who you should talk to. At Invest Nova Scotia, we do have a regional business development team. So we have a regional business development advisor in different regions in the province. They would be happy to speak with any business and try to help them navigate the direction that, or who they should talk to, or what programs they should look at, because we also have a lot of programming. Damien mentioned TAP, that's the Trade Accelerator program that would help more experienced companies move into new markets. We have a program called Launch Export that would help more less experienced exporters or new exporters move into new markets. And then we do a lot of capacity building through workshops, one-on-one work. And then Damien also mentioned trade missions, which we do in some sectors. And so we'd be happy to help. We have access to a lot of partners and partner programs as well. And there's a lot of good federal programs, such as the Canada Digital Adoption Program, that is out now, that the federal government has put out through COVID to try to help companies develop their digital assets to take advantage of e-commerce opportunities, as Lisa had mentioned earlier. So we're here to help, and I know that there's other partners that are here to help as well. So I just we've got a few more minutes. I guess in the last couple minutes, I want to hear from the group on what they might do, what the advice that if you had to look back and really analyze the journey that your company has taken, what advice would you give to yourself, and what advice would you give to someone that's starting out today from an export perspective? And maybe we'll start. Well, who would like to start? Let's go with the Damien. You had the biggest smile.
Okay. I think Laura had mentioned it earlier. It's take your time, go slow, put the time into it, put the research in, be a bit more strategic. When I look at some of the markets we've gone into, maybe we jumped in a little bit hastily. We didn't have full market knowledge. We probably didn't get the maximum for our products that we could have. So I think it's really planning that entry into that market, making sure that you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and really being strategic and reaching out to, you know, experts who've been there before. I think it was Lisa who said that earlier, you know, don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no stupid questions. And, you know, for example, in the seafood sector, even though we compete, you know, all the processors in Nova Scotia, when we're on trade missions together, we're helping each other. We're working with each other. If there's a species that we don't sell, but we know a competitor has, we'll direct someone over there. So it's, you know, this is a long-winded answer, but I guess, you know, what I would say is just, you know, take your time, make sure you're ready to enter that market. And, you know, don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it, or ask for expertise of somebody who's been there before. And I think, Kyle, you said earlier about, you know, your regional advisors with Invest Nova Scotia. So I'm going to give a shout out to Wanda McLean here in Cape Breton, because, you know, she's a fantastic resource and really great to deal with. And if she doesn't have the answer, she'll find someone who does have the answer for you. So that would be my answer.
Could I'll ask you, you speak to trade missions.
Yeah.
The BD perspective, I know that your company certainly joins us on trade missions. Are they a key piece of the business development puzzle, or are they one of the tools, and what are the other tools, I guess, that you guys would utilize?
Trade missions are certainly one of the tools. I mean, I think as we've grown, we've built out our sales team as well. And again, we keep using the word strategic, but, you know, I remember when I did the Trade Accelerator program, I think one of the questions they asked was, are you successful in spite of what you've done or because of what you've done? And when we kind of went back and did an internal review, we realized that, you know, we had hit on some great markets purely by chance. So it's really trying to be more strategic. So during, you know, outside of trade missions, you know, our sales team are constantly trying to reach out to new markets, find out new burgeoning markets. You know, where's the next market, I guess, especially in a very competitive industry such as seafood. You're always trying to find that next market that hasn't been developed yet. So, for example, China is saturated at this time. So, you know, are there other markets in Southeast Asia? Can we take advantage of CETA with respect to the European Union? So that takes time. You know, if you want to break into the European Union, you know, you're looking at 12 to 24 months of just trying to develop new customers, new markets before you can actually get in there. So yeah, there's no off season, I guess, when you're trying to develop a sales strategy. It's something that you have to be cognizant of all the time. And like I said, you know, with COVID, that suddenly changed everything. And, you know, we wouldn't have accessed a lot of our new US markets without COVID, because we had barriers to getting into China at that time. So we had no option but to pivot and find new markets. And we were lucky to find some new customers in California, for example, and other states like that traditionally we wouldn't have gone near of in the US.
Thank you. I will Chris O'Shea has been putting a few plugs in on the chat, which it's really helpful, to be honest, because we hadn't mentioned BDC yet in this. BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada, is really supportive and has programming for entrepreneurs looking to expand nationally. Damien, you mentioned EDC, Export Development Canada, earlier, which I think is critical is a critical organization for exporters to be talking to for a number of reasons, including the insurance side of it. There's a ton of federal and provincial programming, and again, it can be confusing, but there are people here, certainly at Invest Nova Scotia, that can help you navigate those. Michael, your thoughts on if you were starting out today, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I'm not going to echo what everyone else has said, because it's really important, taking your time and do not rush into it. I know what advice I would give myself, 5 years ago would definitely be doing your due diligence on not just the market that you're going into, but as well as the partners that you're going into business with on international market. As soon as you leave our borders, you don't always have that protection that you would have here. So there's other risks out there beyond just losing money on a bad deal, but there's reputational risks and other things that can happen depending on what your partners might be doing or what your customers might be doing as well. So spending a lot of time and effort and asking questions on due diligence on your partners as well as your market is really, really key. We unfortunately did not do that at one time, and we did lose a lot of money and had some reputational damage internationally for a project that went south. So because it was just rushed, we went in too fast, too quickly. So I can certainly give myself advice and other people in that regards of doing your due diligence. So
yeah, that's a great piece of advice. It's something that we have unfortunately seen with some companies where they get excited to export, they dive into it without having done the research and the diligence needed. And so I really like that piece of advice. Laura, and I see that Laura mentioned in the chat that she's on her way to a trade mission shortly. So, and I did know that Laura uses trade missions as a piece of her business development tool. So Laura, what's your advice to someone starting out today?
My husband has this great phrase, I don't know where he picked it up, but it's like, don't boil the ocean. Be extremely focused about how you're attacking a market. If you try to do too many things at once, you're never going to do them well. So, being really, really strategic in one particular location and even one particular focus of your product is even more helpful than trying to do all the things at once. And the other thing is, I always act a little bit like a tourist when I'm traveling. Like I love traveling and I find that curiosity and that wonder and that sort of like wandering element helps me discover things that I never would have. Like I go to South by Southwest every year and I kind of just wander into conference panels, and I found this one panel where a VP from Quincy Jones Productions was speaking. I tweeted at her and I was like, I loved what you said. And she ended up replying back to me. She came to our panel. We ended up forming a relationship and a partnership, and we have worked with their artists since then. And that was just like, a random thing that happened that I have definitely didn't plan, but now I can use that to leverage other partnerships. So don't forget the fun in the part of exporting. You're out there in the world and it's fun to discover that kind of thing.
That's a good point, Laura, because I think one thing we see is that people can be afraid of exporting. It's not easy. I mean, clearly, it's a lot of work, as we've discussed today. But I think there's huge benefit for companies to export, and I think it can be a lot of fun to see the growth in new markets for your company. So. That's a great point that I really appreciate. So thank you. And then last but not least, Lisa, your thoughts on the advice you'd give someone starting out today, or the advice you'd give yourself if you had to restart.
Just patience. Things take a long time. They're not instantaneous. Be willing to pivot constantly. And the only reason why things don't happen is because you've given up. you just keep trying different strategies in different ways, and you keep going back again and again. Eventually it's going to happen.
You know what? Very good point. It's a point I try to teach my kids, that you're going to fail. You're
That's
going to
right.
fail. You're going to fail lots, but
You have to.
yes, and if you use them as learning opportunities, you will have success in the long run. And I think that is a very applicable to companies that are trying to export. Like we just said, it's very challenging. There's new ways to do things every day. There's new things to learn. But we have a great group of companies across Nova Scotia that are having a lot of success in selling their products outside of the province, and including the 4 folks on this panel, you guys. And I know there's support for other companies, whether it be support on how to do something, or whether it just be emotional support because something's not quite working and they need to talk to somebody to try to help them through that. So I just noticed we're down to the last 5 minutes of the panel, but what I'll do is there anybody have any last comments before we close? That's something that you might have thought of that you think is important for the audience to be aware of? No?
I'll
All right.
just mention just one
sure.
more thing is that,
Yeah.
you know, one thing that I'm finding these days is consumer trust is a major thing that we have to consider all the time. And there's a lot of suspicion of corporations and a lot of suspicion of new companies, a lot of suspicion of companies from other places. People always think you're out to get them. And so FaceTime with customers is actually really, really important. When we couldn't do it for 2 or 3 years and we couldn't get out in front of people, it's almost more important now just to remind people that we are real people and we can, you know, you can be trusted and you can hear them out and you can hear their concerns. And so I would encourage just travel in terms of your export strategy, just be out there actually in front of people.
Great point. Was meeting with a client yesterday who said the same thing. They thought when a year into COVID, there was a lot of thought that the virtual piece would take over long term and that the in-person face-to-face travel would go away. And I think that has proven to not be true. I think the travel piece is important, and it is certainly back. I do think there is a place for virtual, but I agree with you, Laura. I think the in-person face-to-face meetings, the more people you talk to, the more connections you make, the more networking you do, the better opportunity you have to learn and grow. So that's a great point. All right. Well, I think we're essentially out of time. I really want to thank the panelists, Laura Simpson, Lisa Learning, Michael Peters, and Damien Barry for joining us today. I think your perspectives have been very insightful, and I hope that the audience has enjoyed it. I know that I was able to learn a lot over the last hour. For everybody out there, if anybody has any questions on this panel or on Invest Nova Scotia or on anything from an exporting perspective, I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody. You can reach out to me either via LinkedIn or my email. I believe my email is put on the chat. I thought I saw it there a few minutes ago. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be really happy to speak with you. And next up, we've got a number of workshops that are going to start at 10:20 and run concurrently. So I would encourage everybody to stick around for the day, enjoy the workshops. And again, thanks everybody.
Thank you.